Across the pond.
Good afternoon. Is it good afternoon? I think it is. Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Across the Pond. You with me, UAP Lee, and do I have something special for you this week? We're joined by the Reverend Canon Brett Murphy. How do I address you? How would you like addressing, Sir Brett?
Reverend? Just Brett is fine. Just Brett is perfectly fine.
For the purposes of this podcast, then it will be Brett. Brett, you're an interesting character. I'm just going to go straight in just because we've got so much to talk about. Guys, you know what we're all about on this podcast. You know we touch on the subjects that others dare not touch on. We'd like to get into the interesting realms of what's real, what's not real, what's being told, what's not being told. We've got a very, like I said, an incredible guest on today. I'm not going to waffle on too much. I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. Brett, please tell the audience who you are.
Hello there, audience. Well, yeah, I'm Father Brett. I'm an independent Anglican priest. So I left the Church of England because of its various compromises on doctrine and traditional teaching about 3 years ago now. So I'm very privileged to lead a lovely little independent Anglican church up in Morecambe, which is growing steadily. It's kind of like herding cats, but it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. I come originally, probably tell, from Australia, where I was trained and ordained for ministry in the Anglican church. And I have a bit of a passion for speaking out quite boldly about things that I find very interesting or I hold dear or values I have. I'm not one for remaining quiet. It's probably how I landed on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's probably got something to do with it. What I will say is, traditionally from my experience, especially being in Britain all my life, coming up through the school system and everything else, when I was young, Christianity was very much a part of the school system. We used to go down to the church, for Mass and for Christmas and all the various other, holidays and occasions that there are in the calendar. You don't see it so much anymore, but I suppose where I was going with that is you don't really see a lot of people from the clergy in the UK speaking out and being so outspoken towards things that are going on politically. So I suppose the question is, why do you vary? Why do you differ from everybody else when the majority or the vast majority remain quiet?
I suppose the simplest and quickest answer is effectively the Church of England in particular, which is the established church, has cancelled itself. So in a desperate pursuit to remain relevant to contemporary culture, it became more and more like the world around it, thinking that would be something that was winsome to people. But the great irony of the Bible is that Jesus says that we're meant to be in the world, but not of the world. So Christianity is a supernatural, otherworldly religion, and we're meant to actually hold values and beliefs that are of a different kingdom. Jesus says he heralds the coming of the kingdom of God. We're meant to be, if we believe in Jesus, citizens of that kingdom. So the more the church pursued winning the world by becoming like the world, the less relevant it became. And so there are still some outspoken clergymen in the Church of England. The problem is a lot of the upper echelons of its hierarchy, the bishops and those in charge, are I would say, captured by a woke ideology. So they're very quick to cancel anyone who puts their head above the battlement, which is effectively what happened to me. It's one of the reasons I left the Church of England. I was too noisy, which was probably the best decision of my life, really. Turned out pretty good. But yeah, you get a lot of clergymen who would love to speak up, who really would, who are very biblically faithful, very patriotic, are not happy with the direction Britain's going. They want to see it return to those Judeo-Christian values you were mentioning that were, instilled in schools and in culture, but they just don't quite have the courage to do it because they know what the consequences are. And for a clergyman, it's a big deal, man. Like your house is tied up in your income. So if they cancel you, you got a wife and kids, well, they kick you out in the street. It's not a particularly easy thing to face down. So, and they it's hard to say outright sack a vicar, but they can make your life a living hell. So a lot of them don't want to go through it. So, some people say to me, oh, you must look down on or judge these other vicars who don't speak out, who haven't made a stand. No, not at all, because it's, you have to count the cost before you do it. But that's basically why. And the other reason why you don't get a lot of clergy speaking up much these days is because a lot of them have capitulated. A lot of them have gone along with the zeitgeist of culture. And there's a lot of clergy that, to be really blunt, aren't even Christian. They don't even believe the Bible. So, I mean, I met a vicar from a neighboring parish the other week who told me I was behind the times because he doesn't even believe the devil exists. So I just laughed at him. I just went on my way. Better things to do.
It's an interesting standpoint to have as a vicar, isn't it, really? One thing I was going to say there, and again, the viewers will agree, one of the things that we like to do on this podcast, or one of the things that a lot of the topics that we discuss on this podcast allow us to do, is connect the dots. And one thing we will touch on during this episode is the ET, the extraterrestrial phenomena, that is. But one thing I will just reference from that to what you've just said is the suppression. There seems to be this incredible power that the deep state has of suppressing information, suppressing whistleblowers. And the one thing I wanted to say was whistleblowers from the NHI, the UAP phenomenon realm, they get shut down pretty quick. They get, they come on, they'll tarnish somebody's reputation, they destroy their professional career, and they suppress them that way, often starting with threats and various other things. And that's why you don't get a lot of whistleblowers coming forward. And again, something you just mentioned there, they'll lose their pension. A lot of these guys are obviously ex-military, public services, so they have pensions to lose as well. So there is a lot on the line for them. And the one thing that you've just said there is that the church is doing the same thing. They're suppressing disinformation, suppressing people's beliefs, true beliefs, if you're going by the book, literally. And they're suppressing that and taking people's livelihoods away. What you just said again, with the house being attached to your job, you've also got a pension to lose as well, right? So it's the same thing. The deep state is the same thing. Could they be linked, politically and religiously? Are they working together? When you link these dots, or when you do start connect these dots, you can see the similarities, and you think, are they the same people pulling the strings behind the curtain? Is it the same Oz?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. Yes, it is. Yeah. So I think, we'll go down this conspiracy nut route. That's fine. I think that there is a shadowy cabal of people who actually, let's just dive in on the deep end. They worship Satan, and their intention is to dismantle everything that's good in the world. And, it goes right down to even things like the dismantling of family values and the family unit, the destruction of our culture, and the dissolution of nation states, things like that, globalism. And why would they want to stop the church or influence the church? Well, the church traditionally has been a bulwark against these sorts of things. It has been, the guardian of morality, a vanguard against dictatorship. And so if you erode the Christian church to the point that it becomes basically a shadow of its former self, I think Carl Benjamin said that the liberals will kill your religion and wear it like a skin suit, which I thought was a fantastic quote. It becomes, almost a parody of true Christian religion. And then it's powerless, it's toothless, it's no threat to anyone. And so people's religious values, particularly Christian values, are so deeply held that they would be willing to die for them, So if you erode that very gradually over, say, a 50-year period, which is what we've seen, about half a century odd, of gradually drip, drip, drip changing the direction of the church away from the good book and towards something that it was never intended to be, then a lot of people will be swept up in that, won't even notice, a bit like boiling the frog. You heat the water very slowly, don't notice. And the church has always been the moral compass of the culture. So if the culture then goes completely off the rails and becomes, debauched, then the church no longer has that sort of, biblically speaking, we could say the prophetic role to act like the prophet, to speak and say, watch out, come on. There is a God, he is watching. Let's go back to the ways we used to be when we were prosperous, flourishing people. And if you've effectively, to use a crude phrase, castrated the church, then you've won half the battle. So I think it is the same people, but I actually would go even further and say it's probably not just people. In the Bible, there's in the book of Ephesians, Paul the Apostle says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities in spiritual darkness. So I think it's the machinations of the evil one pulling the strings in the political realm, in the church, to manipulate culture. And more people are seeing it, man. They're waking up. They're like, hang on, there's something going on here.
I agree. I fully do agree with that as well. And that has left me with a question, a massive question, actually, that I want to refer back to. I don't want to get into it now because it's it's a huge topic in itself. But just going back to what you just said there, you know, what we can see, again, when you connect in the dots, you can see people are being placed, and this is a worldwide issue, by the way. This isn't just a UK-based thing, from what I see anyway. But people have been put in positions of power who are liberal, who are woke, and they've installed that message downwards, obviously, through their circles of influence, who essentially come under them in their leg of the power. And we've seen the dilution of everything, really, especially the Christianity side of things. One of the things that made Christianity really effective is the fact that there was a fear of doing good, and you know, or the joy of doing good and going to heaven, and the fear of doing bad and potentially going to hell. That fear sort of kept everybody in the middle, working through those commandments, or trying to live the best life via those sets of rules. Right? We've seen the dilution of that, especially since World War II, the end of, at least. It's been diluted and diluted to the point, this is from my opinion, where they put people in positions who have this liberal, woke, nonsensical view, installing all of this stuff, and they've normalized and taken away the fear, basically, of heaven and hell. They've sort of normalized the fact that that's just nonsense, and, you know, fantastical nonsense. And they've done that, in my way of looking at it, through media, the big media, mass media, and then movies and TV and film and, you know, music especially. The messaging within the programming that's within music, TV, film is horrific. And like you said, you mentioned it, satanic, these satanist, you know, worshipping people behind the curtain. You know, look at the music scene, for instance. How much of that is essentially satanic and demonic when you look at it? You see the things that they're doing on stage, where there's children, our children in the audience watching. It's crazy. Sam Smith being one of the culprits.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Oh, yeah. I mean, you see this. I mean, everybody sees this. You said everybody's waking up. You're right.
And so, as well, people are waking up, and even if they're not, I would say not yet Christian, because there is a revival happening, even if they can see that the value of the Christian or the Judeo-Christian basis of culture that we had prior to the post-war consensus was a good thing. You know, certainly there were hard times. Certainly it wasn't all perfect, but the world, and the West particularly, in Britain, we were better off with Christian values than we are with whatever we have now. And you're right, it's been a full frontal assault against everything that we would call wholesome, good, that leads to flourishing at every level, through mass media, effectively brainwashing, pushing and pushing. You know, you've got this sort of zenith in the 60s sexual revolution, and then it's like the floodgates open. Post-war, you reach the late 50s, early 60s, boom, anything goes. And yeah, it's definitely folks who are intentionally satanic, that they're worshipping the devil. Now, even if you don't believe in the devil, even if you're a total atheist, it's not good that these people believe that worldview. So if you believe there's a cosmic good guy and a cosmic bad guy, it's not good to have the people who are rooting for the bad guy manipulating your media, manipulating the minds of young people. And, you know, I used to laugh at my parents, right? Like my dad was like, you know, stick in the mud. I'd be like, he's always on about how evil music is, just a silly old fool. But now I'm a dad, and I've got 3 young kids to raise, and I look at the media that they could be consuming. We're very careful in our household what the kids get to watch, but I look at some of the stuff out there. You know, there's cartoons out there of there was one cartoon of apparently it's on the Disney Channel, the daughter of Satan encouraging kids to do black magic. You think, well, even if you don't believe in black magic, this stuff involves human sacrifice, the destruction of everything that we hold dear as normal and wholesome. It's not good. It's bad. Yeah, and if you're a Christian, then you see, actually, hang on a second. This is a spiritual element to this, which is really evil and is pernicious. It's you're right. The trickle down to every layer of culture, through every institution, is sort of that's the Marxist game, right? The long march through the institutions, and that's what they've done since the end of the Second World War.
Yeah, and you know, I was gonna, and you mentioned something, you know, the breakdown of the family unit and stuff. And you look at how would you dismantle? I mean, think about World War II, right? The end of the war, Britain, post-war Britain, how unified the people were, and this is across Europe and the world, actually. The societies of these democratic countries were so unified and essentially so powerful as a people, because they just overcome maybe the evilest threat that, you know, certainly within their lifetimes and generations to come would remember. The unity was there. So when you think about the system now, the establishments, how do they go about breaking down that strength? First things first, you've got to take away the fear of the good and the bad, like the heaven and hell thing.
Yep.
Mission accomplished. I think they've done that. I don't think people really understand that fear anymore. Second to that, divide the people into groups.
Yep.
And then turn those groups against each other. We look at LGBT, it's got bigger every year for some reason. There's another letter being added yearly almost. And every one of those people seems to be against each other. Yeah,
yes.
It's a
they don't all
party
get
of
along
unity.
within the
It's
group.
not. They all hate each other. One, and then there's others who I suppose who should be in that category, who have put themselves outside that category because they hate that that section of the society, the LGBT movement. You know, I've got gay friends who hate it.
Yep.
And they won't have anything to do with it. But then there's that, and then there's obviously Christianity, and then there's the mass introduction of Islam, and then there's other pockets of societies, even the vegans, you know, everybody. They just turn everybody against each other. So basically this huge population of combined, you know, togetherness has been destroyed. And now we've got groups everywhere who are so divided in every sense of the word, who just cannot come together to see eye to eye against the greater thing, which for me is the people behind the curtain. In Oz, they're doing all of this, but to what end, I don't know. But you know, I heard a guy on the other week, Ryan H, he's currently fighting the Scottish education system because they're talking trans things, and this is 7, 8 year olds talking about the birds and the bees, the big O. They're even mentioning orgasms and stuff. This is to 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds in school. So we've got a guy, Ryan, who's fighting all that stuff up there. But this is being put into our conscience at an early age now.
That's brainwashing.
But what's the next step? Because, like you said, people are waking up. So where are we now? We're heading for civil war by the looks of things. And everybody says, you know, and the signs are all there. But where are we going with this?
What's the end game? Yeah. It's like the Avengers, you know, Doctor Strange. We're in the end game now, Mr. Stark. The end game is effectively what the globalists and the despots have always wanted. You know, think of Hitler, think of Napoleon, even Kaiser Wilhelm in the Great War. There have been men who have wanted to have total dominance of the human race, and it is a satanic impulse. The Bible calls it the spirit of Antichrist. But of course, I think that the devil and his minions have figured out that actually raising up a dictator and taking over the world is a very inefficient and ineffective way to do it, because people will resist that, and they will fight against that, even at great personal cost. Just the other day, I was re-listening to Churchill's "Fight Them on the Beaches" speech, and I had to muse and think how he would roll in his proverbial grave at the sight of these little dinghies coming across the channel, when he insisted that Napoleon couldn't get here on his flat-bottom boats. But we as an island nation, as a people with a long and rich heritage of Christian culture and a democratic governance, we have resisted totalitarian despots time and time again, even at relentless sacrifice. You don't have to go to any town in Britain, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, America, and look at their war memorials and the names on them, and you realize what we were willing to lay down to stop dictatorship.
Well, my family's names are on some of those monuments.
Same here.
Along with a lot of people, you know.
Yeah, yep. And you look at the names, and a lot of the surnames are shared across the same. I was just down with my sons having a look on Anzac Day at the memorial in Morecambe, and I said, look at the surnames that are the same. You know, these are brothers, fathers, cousins, whole families effectively wiped out. So we would resist, I think, another attempt at a worldwide dictator taking over, you know, another Hitler, another Napoleon. So I think the evildoers behind the curtain, these servants of the devil himself, their modus operandi shifted to become basically infiltration of Western democracies to bring them down from within. And because what made the West strong was the fact that we have a Christian basis for our culture. So like you've said, to erode that has been their number one goal. And then everything connected to that, including family values, the education system, not even over-sexualization, but the hyper-sexualization of children. You look at some of the stuff. We had a chat with some parents at church recently about using TikTok. And, you know, these folks were completely unaware what their kids were looking at. And they were looking at absolute I would describe it as smut. No child should see this crap. And they're just scrolling through hundreds of these videos a minute because they're such short form videos. And you know, it's conditioning their little brains, man, to absorb this stuff. So if you're going to do that, what you would want to do is, if I were an evil dictator, I'd do exactly what they've done. It's a clever strategy, isn't it? Infiltrate the culture, make you hate what you used to love, make people forget what was good and righteous. And like you said, people have lost the fear of God, and they live as though there is no God. They do whatever they please. They live for the moment. Even, like you said, the sectarianism is massive. Everyone's infighting against each other. There's no unity, no cohesion. It's a low-trust society. But even within all of that chaos, you have a sort of, I don't know, like a dissolution of the bonds of what holds a culture together. I mean, are we even a culture anymore? What does it? If you ask someone, what's it mean to be British now? Or what's it mean to be American? Or what's it mean to be Australian? They can barely give you a cohesive answer. Because
I think a lot can.
Yeah.
I think if you was to genuinely give someone a pen and paper and say, what does it mean to be British or Australian? Deep down, they could give you the answer. I think everybody could. It doesn't matter how woke you are. I think deep down, you could write on that paper what that meant to you. But you've been that disillusioned with the idea of it, and that, you know, you've been just veered off in a direction that's not your own. I think you're that disillusioned with it, you wouldn't. You know what I mean? You just wouldn't put it down, would you? You'd just put down the alternative, whatever that may be.
Whatever they've been told.
Exactly. Whatever they've been told. Programming. That's right. I'd think so. I agree with you.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, you know, again, this is touching on the conspiracy stuff. We talk about it, and I will disclaimer that this is just a conspiracy. There are people out there, and I've heard the words from these people that say that there is an unholy alliance between communism and Islam, essentially, in the movement across the West.
Yes.
Again, that's a conspiracy that I've heard people talk about. What's your opinion on that? I don't necessarily have one. I don't know.
Most of the conspiracies that I've had in the last 5 years have become truth, so that's a good track record. Unfortunately, I wish they hadn't. But yeah, I reckon you know, there's some merit to this. So I call, well, communism cultural Marxism, and this is, you know, if people take the time to look up groups like the Fabian Society, right? This is
Dharma's a part of it.
He is yes, and so is Rachel Reeves, and you know, when she put up the portrait of that vile communist witch from the 30s in the office of the Exchequer, I thought this is insane. Why are people not waking up? She's literally put a portrait of a raging commie from the 30s up on the wall. Like, seriously, they're not hiding who they are. So communism, or cultural Marxism, it goes by various names, socialism, basically what we might call far left. They are, you know, the modern word would be woke. I call that Satan's left hand. And Satan's right hand, in my humble opinion, his hammer, is Islam. And if we circle back to what we were discussing just before, if your intention is to bring about, which I think is the intention of the devil, because I've read the end of the Bible, it is to bring about a one world government with a one world religion, then you're going to have to smash apart nation states. So, like I said, they tried that with dictators, didn't work. So the way to do it is as if you're in a castle siege. You know, remember that there's that scene from the second Lord of the Rings movie, the Battle of Helm's Deep. They're on the wall, they're defending the wall against these hordes of orcs. And then I think it's Legolas and Gimli have a right panic because there's an orc with a bomb who's coming to get in this little hole in the bottom of the wall. Some LOTR fan's going to absolutely really hate me for this because I've butchered the recollection.
Paraphrasing.
Yeah, I'm completely paraphrasing. I might have made this up. Who knows? But anyway, they're panicking because if you undermine the foundation, if you destroy the defensive structure around the castle will fall. You know, a castle can be sieged, you know, if you've got food and water, near on indefinitely. So that's a great metaphor for Western culture. The Western culture has been a bulwark. It has been a fortress against a dictatorship. It's been a fortress against the forces of evil for a very long time. And you would need to basically get inside the castle, to undermine it, which is what cultural Marxism has done. It's spread like a cancer throughout every institution. If people take the time to, like I said, look up the Fabians, look up the origins of the Labour Party, look up the Communist Manifesto, you will get chills down your spine because you're seeing it played out right now in real time. And then they need a hammer to smash in, and the hammer is Islam. And the left hand of Satan and the right hand of Satan, people need to observe this, they never clash. The left,
no, it seems not.
Intrinsically, the left and Islam are diametrically opposite to each other. They should never team up. It's an impossible team up. But then you have, queers for Palestine or something. You think, well, it's like chickens for KFC. What are you talking about? They'd throw you off a building. Like, seriously, you'd be thrown off a building. Why are you being friendly with these people? They're not your friends. Doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't. And, I don't think you need to be that overly intelligent to see the clues.
Well, there's a puppet master.
I mean, if you look at the state of the protests, for instance, I mean, I don't know if you saw our recent episode. We had a guy called Adam Swarton, who was a CEO of a protest company that provided crowds on demand, essentially.
Rent a crowd.
Rent a crowds. And you see these protests that come together, like you said, I seen one with the LGBT guys, and they're blending in with the Palestine guys, and I'm thinking to myself, these two worlds, it has to be orchestrated. There's no way on earth these two groups of people would ever come together in a peaceful manner, ever.
No.
And let's get it right. If they got what they wanted and Sharia law was installed within the UK, those people would not be safe.
Nope.
They fought for it, but like you said, that is a really, really good way of putting it. It's like chickens for KFC. It's bang on. But that stupidity alone, that should be enough to show people that are on the fence, maybe out there watching on, that this is a fix. It's a setup. The whole thing has got to be set up. Again, I don't think you need an overly high IQ to see that.
No. And you don't have to be particularly conspiratorial, man. That's not a particularly. It's just observing facts.
Exactly that. I agree with that. And again, I don't like to. I don't. My opinions don't come from a place of stupidity. I don't think. I think I like to look at the situation and see what's in front of my eyes. And sometimes when the information there is so obvious and blatant, you can't help but pay attention to it and just put the dots together, connect the dots. And for me, there's so many. It's just an overwhelming decision to come to that this. You can see what's going on. And like you said, more people are waking up now. But what do you think is coming next? And I will go on to the big question that I wanted to ask earlier next.
Okay, because I've been hanging for this big question. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
I don't know what it is. Audience, don't assume that we've pre-prepared this. That's just like everything in my ministry. I don't know what I'm doing.
Exactly that. It's like everything I've ever done, mate. It's off the cuff.
Yeah, people say to me, "Oh, Vicar, I really love your church. This is great. That was an amazing sermon. How did you grow this church?" I'm like, I don't know. I just turn up here.
That's what you have. You've got a natural gift of talking.
Some
have got it.
I kissed the Blarney Stone once. That must be what happened. Oh, boy. So what's next? Boy, man. Jeez Louise. It ain't good. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So I've been saying to people, I know a lot of Christian pastors. So it's, for transparency, my gift's in the Lord. I'm gifted as a preacher. I'm gifted as a leader. Like you said, I can talk for England. I can rally troops. But I don't have like what you might call supernatural gifts. But I know some people who have gifts of prophecy, people who are gifted with insight from God, and they're observing the facts like you and I are, and many others. But they're also getting this feeling of on the wind in their bones that something very bad is coming. It's a bit like from Harry Potter, something wicked this way comes, and you don't have to be a particularly prophetic person or a particularly clever person to see that. So I've been saying to folks, we are entering into a time of absolute existential crisis, existential threat to the United Kingdom and to Western democracies. So I would say that things like demographic decline, birth rate collapse, population replacement, these things should actually scare the willies out of folks. That should scare the willies out of you. So you should be able to figure out from just looking at literal statistical data, which is what we're looking at, and observable evidence. Just turn the telly on and you can see what's happening. That there is an intentional design to obliterate Western culture. And by that I mean effectively Christendom, and to wipe it off the map, to make way for a totalitarian, completely dictatorial form of government. I think you're seeing this emerge more and more in the UK, in things like the online safety bill, which is a Trojan horse. Okay, yeah, nobody wants kids to look at, rhymes with corn on the internet. Nobody wants that. In fact, I would go so far as to say, I would agree even, and I'm fairly libertarian in my freedoms, that you should have to have age verification for adults to view that stuff online. Fair enough. It should be completely blocked. I personally, as a Christian pastor, could never endorse people watching it. But look, people are adults. They can make their own free choices. Kiddies should be completely protected for it. I even think there should be laws against kids having smartphones, man. I'm that hardcore. I'm like, no. If you're under 16, you don't get a smartphone. You can have a dumb phone so you can call your mum in an emergency, call the police, but you don't need to be exposed to, tap. Sorry, I said a bad word. You don't need to have that. You don't need to have that on tap. Yeah. So
I love that. Yeah, I really agree.
Yeah. So I think effectively, people need to wake up and see that there is an intentional effort. It's very obviously intentional to obliterate the Judeo-Christian values, the foundation of the West. And if I were to go down into my cellar now and just start with a sledgehammer bashing apart the foundations of my house, eventually that house would collapse. It's a matter. It's a fact. It's a matter of time, and that's what's happening in the West at the moment. So, what will come next, is the big question, and it's not going to be good. I don't know exactly what form it will take, but if people don't wake up, and if people don't peacefully, I want to emphasize that, rise up and do something about it now. And you can start in your own life with your own family, in your own sphere of influence. People don't actually wise up to what's going on, then when whatever is coming breaks upon the world, then I think a lot of people will be really caught unawares and be very, they'll be absolutely devastated. They'll regret that they didn't see it coming. But the game is always a totalitarian dominance in one form or another. Now, the hope I have is that, say, in America, you have something like the MAGA Trump movement. I mean, love it or hate it, they have actually kicked globalism to the curb. So it is still possible. Prior to Trump's second election win, if he'd have lost this election, I would have given up all hope. I would have been preparing for Jesus to come back. I'm like, okay, see ya, swing low, sweet chariot, take me home. But I think now that we're still in with a chance. And in the UK, it's much more bleak. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I do think that I think there's a high likelihood of civil unrest and severe civil unrest. And I think that is very regrettable, because that's not something anyone should want or be egging on. But it seems, just looking at the facts, that it's likely to happen. And there is a movement of, I call it a common sense movement, of people who are beginning to see the writing on the wall, to borrow a biblical phrase. But is there enough time for us to turn the ship before we hit the rocks? I personally don't think so. I think we're going to go into a very rocky time. I'm sorry to be a pessimist.
No, I agree with you. But this leads me on to the question, and I'm going to put you on the spot. Maybe you're not prepared, but I'm not overly religious. I'm one of the guys I'm not on the fence. I'm more on the religious side of the fence. However, I'm not fully on board. I believe in the powers of good and evil, absolutely. And I believe also that Christianity is on the side of good. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't want to get into it too much at the minute, but I believe what's good is good and what's bad is bad, and I believe what's happening is bad and what was good. Yeah. So I'll ask you this. For the average person sitting at home now watching this, who maybe is like me, who's sort of not on the fence, but more concerned than happy about the way things are going, what can the average person do to get involved and help turn the tide of this and bring us back to the good old days, so to speak?
Yep. My good old granddad used to have a great phrase about sitting on the fence. The only thing you get from sitting on the fence is splinters in your backside. So, yeah, look, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and like, that it's all doom and gloom. So, I mean, I've read the end of the Bible. Jesus wins, so that's an encouragement. But it doesn't mean that it's going to always be easy. It doesn't mean that the road to that is necessarily pleasant. I don't, a lot of people are saying that, from a Christian perspective, we are in the end times. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. Jesus tells us not to predict that. There have been plenty of very dark times in the past that, by a very narrow margin, we've pulled back from the edge of oblivion. It's possible. So, Murphy was an optimist. So I try to be a bit optimistic. I think if people want to make a change, what you need to do is fundamentally return to those values which have been so denigrated, which you've been taught relentlessly are evil, but are actually very good. So first and foremost, go buy a Bible and start reading it. Preferably, I would suggest in one of the 4 Gospels, and you will encounter there the truth of Jesus Christ, which will change your life. Secondly, even if you're not particularly religious, find a Bible-believing church. Don't go to one of these woke, lefty, hollowed-out fake churches. Go to a Bible-believing church where, generally speaking, most of the Bible-believing churches I know are really loving. So you need community around you. And churches are about the only place left where like-minded people like that can come together. And there is I was saying to the lads, we have a church lads night every Wednesday night, and I was saying to the chaps, it's a lot more than just, a couple of beers and cigars. It's actually having a community around you of people who share similar beliefs, support you, and when the proverbial hits the fan, either in the wider scheme of things or in your own life, you have this wonderful group of people who genuinely love you. So start to turn it around. And then in your own family, in your own lives, return to those values that made the West great. I mean, even if you're not going to become a Christian, well, I think you should, but even if you're not, I'd be pretty crap priest if I said, don't worry, don't be a Christian. But if you're looking at what has, I like to use the term flourishing, what has flourished our culture, flourished families, flourished individuals. Like you said, it has been those Christian values. Kids used to be taught the Lord's Prayer, the 10 Commandments. They knew right from wrong. So even if they didn't believe Jesus died on the cross to save them from their sins, and he rose again on Easter Day, which is the ultimate good to believe in, but even if they didn't believe that, they had instilled in them stealing's bad, murder's bad, adultery's bad.
I'm a product of that.
Yeah.
Again, I've grown up. I'm not really religious. However, I know what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. So this is, at the very basic level of, I suppose, Christian programming. I think I'm a good person because of that.
Yes, precisely. And, the theologians call those the commands of God objective moral standards. So the reason why they are good compared to the moral standards of the world, of, say, humanism, atheism, is fundamentally because we believe they come from an objective source. So they come from a source outside of the human race. So if there is an all-powerful, all-knowing God who created the human race, it stands to reason he knows better than us. So it's very much, that's why God refers to himself as Father and as the cosmic patriarch, because parents know better than their children. So I have a 9-month-old baby girl called Faith. She's the light of our life, wonderful baby. And we have 2 little sons as well, who are 9 and 11. And baby Faith is just getting into that crawling around, touching everything phase. And some things, we're baby-proofed as much as we can, but some things are not for babies to touch. And so if I say, Faith, no, she cries because she doesn't like Daddy telling her don't cross the boundary. And, well, she's 9 months old. She can't know better. She can't know danger. She can't know right from wrong. Well, actually, if we consider the human race to be God's children, then surely if we believe that there is an all-powerful cosmic creator who fashioned the entire universe, he's a little bit smarter than us. So when we read the Bible and we read these 10 commandments, which the 10 commandments are like a shorthand summary of the 613 commandments in the Bible. If you read those, and then you read the Beatitudes of Christ, and you read the golden rule of Jesus, which is do unto others as you would have done unto you, then you realize, well, that's not coming from humanity, because actually we're fundamentally selfish, self-centered little beasts. And if you live by these rules, which are subjective, well, things go wrong. Well, I feel like, I want to eat a tub of ice cream a day. Well, okay, enjoy diabetes. Actions have consequences, but the Bible says gluttony is a sin. So if I enjoy all things in moderation, which the Bible tells me to do, I can have a bit of ice cream, but I can also have exercise and live a good life. And you flourish. You actually flourish. So people have been taught that God's an angry policeman in the sky. God's pointing the finger. He's cross with everyone. He's going to send everyone and burn them all in hell. Well, that's true. Like you mentioned, heaven and hell are realities. There's no denying that. Jesus, in fact, mentioned hell more than he mentioned heaven. So he's very serious about warning people about it. But fundamentally, God is about love. And a loving parent does not want people to live in ways which harm them. I mean, no parent's going to say, oh, yeah, please go touch the fire, sweetheart. It's like these lunatics who say, did you ask your baby's consent before you change their nappy? I mean, shut up. Shut up.
Oh, gosh.
Just shut up. A parent looks after their kids. God's our parent. He knows best. That's the distilled wisdom. So if people want to get back to the old-fashioned values that make the world a better place, and also if you want to just survive the absolute insanity, man, without losing your marbles, because I've been there. I've been to that point where I'm like, woof, things are dark. Well, there is a light source. And, you can live according to those values. And then the ultimate of that, of course, is believing in Jesus and following him. Because he wrote those laws anyway, so he knows best. There you go.
Well, there you go. The reason I wanted to ask that question, like I said, is, there is a lot of people within the population who are not overwhelmingly religious. But I know, and I'm one of them, there's people out there now that feel lost a little, maybe. Perhaps they don't want to, go and dive straight into the Bible and, I suppose, go full on 100% straight away. I suppose what I'm asking and what you've just said, the message here is it doesn't matter whether you want to go in 100% and be, reading the book every night and every morning and referring to it at all minutes of the day. You don't have to go on that. The point is you're welcome.
Start somewhere.
Even if you're just dipping your toe in it, even if you're just going for a coffee at one of the churches and you're just becoming a part of the community, it's about community.
Well said.
And one of the things I've sort of said is, if you want to get involved at the grassroots level but you don't know what to do, just look at it this way. Try and improve the street that you live on.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
If you can improve the living conditions of the people or within the street that you live on, and everybody has that opinion, then the place is going to get better and better week by week, day by day anyway. Yep. So if you just focus on your house and your street, it's a good place to start, I think.
Baby
and like you say, just try and get involved with the community of Christianity again, because like you said, and like I've said, I'm not overly religious, but I've grown up knowing that those code of ethics that runs through the church is the right place to be if you want to live a good, happy life, basically, and with good people around you. Yeah. No dangers, less threats. I just think it's the better place to be, and it's been proven. We've lived that way of life before, and people are happy.
It's got a track record.
So why not again?
Track record, man.
Exactly, it's got a track record. And I tell you what, also what's got a track record? The last 30 years of misery. Yeah, that's got a track record as well. And again, just look at the signs, people. Just wake up.
I don't think socialism and communism have worked for us. I don't think godless humanism have worked for us. And I love what you said about make a little difference in your community. Do what you can, which is living out the golden rule of Christ. Do what you do unto others as you would have done unto you. So a little example is around our house, me and my sons went out and we did a litter pickup. And we just ordered off Amazon these plastic circles that you clip a bag into. Bought some of them nipper-napper thingies. And we went round, we were picking them up. And we went all around the block. Because I kept driving home, parking up and saying, I'm just damn sick of this rubbish everywhere. I'm damn sick of this rubbish. And my oldest son said to me, Dad, why are you waiting for the government? Well, he's a very cynical little fellow. He said, why are you waiting for Big Daddy government to come and fix your problems? I said, well, actually good. That's a communist way of thinking. The state will solve your problems. Well, the state hasn't come and cleaned up all the rubbish. It's a tip. So, and there's tons of towns in England that are like this now because our economy's falling to bits and our local councils are horrendously mismanaged. And, that's a whole other kettle of fish. We probably need completely replaced. So I thought, well, okay, I can't fix that, but what I can do is go pick up the damn rubbish. So I did it. And when I was doing it, a little old lady was walking her dog and she said to me, excuse me, why are you doing this? And I said, well, I want to make the world a better place. And she said, but why? And she was just wasn't aggressive, just taken back, man. She was just shocked. And I said, well, if you really want the answer, I'm a Christian. And she was tickled pink. She said, well, I'm not religious, but exactly what you said, man. It's the better way to live. And she said, well, you're out here. This is just selfless because you could be doing something else with your time. I said, yeah, actually. I said, I could be ripping up floorboards that are rotten in my house. I got work to do, but I want to fix this. I'm probably avoiding ripping up the floorboards, but I want to fix this. And you know what? 2 weeks later, a lot of the rubbish is back. Well, okay, we'll go do it again in a month. And if every neighbor went out and did that, imagine the difference it would make.
Absolutely. I mean, we start with the little things. Even neighbourly wise, we just put the bins out. You know, when we put a bin out on a Monday, if the neighbour's not done theirs and they forgot, we'll do theirs. Yep. Do you know what I mean? And vice versa, and they return the favour now. And before you know it, there's only 3 doors on the end of our street, 3 houses, and it's the same. You know, we do it for each other. But if everybody did that, you know, just the little things like that, I think the world would just gradually improve. Make my world a better place. Not I want to make the world a better place. Make my world a better place. If everyone has that opinion, and everyone's going to benefit from that. But we are going to take a massive left turn here because it would be a miss of me to get you on, and for the viewers that are into the phenomena, which is UAP and extraterrestrials and non-human intelligence. This is going to be the, I suppose, the fun segment of the show. The doom and gloom's over. We've realised that the UK is in disarray and we need to do something drastic to fix it. We've covered that. So let's talk fun stuff, fantastical for a bit, if you don't mind. And I suppose we can lead on from where we've just been. We've spoke about the good and evil. Let's talk about spirituality and that side of it. Do you believe that the good and evil that we see in the world now, the commies and the left and right hand of the devil that are in action that you referred to earlier, is this a spiritual thing? Is there something, an entity running this, and vice versa on the other side of things? I mean, I know you're a man of God, so obviously we're there, but let's talk about this and we'll move from there organically.
Organic growth. Yes, there is a puppet master behind the forces of evil in the world. It is the devil, and I think people intrinsically actually know that. So one of the pitfalls we have to warn people about is we mustn't think that like the battle between good and dark, light and dark, good and evil is, like the yin and yang equally locked in a tidal lock. Satan is a defeated enemy. He was defeated by Jesus on the cross and in his resurrection. The Eastern Orthodox have a wonderful phrase that Christ has defeated death. He's trampled down death by death, and he's bestowed life on those in the graves. So Jesus is the victor, and one day Jesus will come again. That is a certainty. He will return and end evil in all of its forms forever. The Christian church refers to this as the second coming of Christ. But between now and then, however long that is, the Bible tells us we're not to try and predict the time, there is basically a guerrilla warfare where the devil wants to drag as many souls to hell and cause as much harm as he can, because he hates human beings, because human beings are made in God's image. So behind these vile, evil... I mean, this trickles down to little things. Like, you can't say, oh, the devil made me do it if you choose to do something evil. He might have influenced you, but you still have free will to choose evil. But it comes down to people like, I read in the paper today, Kemi Badenoch gave up on God, walked away from faith because of Joseph Fritzl. Well, okay, the guy was a psycho, a freak. Maybe the devil was influencing. Maybe he's just broken and sinful, and it's like all of us are, but it's manifested itself in a particularly repugnant way. But that's no reason to give up on God. God's still good just because evil happens. And we know that in the end, God's going to set everything right. But in the meantime, there is a battle happening all the time around us. Actually, there's every potential that in the room with you or in the room with me right now, there is an angel or a demon. And they're invisible. They're immortal. And, of course, demons are just fallen angels who rebelled against God. And a great pastor called Derek Prince refers to them as persons without bodies. So they have an intellect. They're actually much smarter than us because they live so long. They accumulate huge amounts of knowledge. Very, very powerful spiritual beings. And there are armies of angels and demons in various ranks and authority and power. And they do clash. And it is a bit like pieces on a chessboard. The devil and his minions are moving certain individuals, key individuals in the media, in the entertainment industry, in politics. They move them around to do their will in an attempt to cause as much harm and destruction as they can. That's the real motive of the devil, because he knows he's lost. It's just to cause pain, to cause destruction. And people, I think, really in their heart of hearts are aware, if they're not aware that there's a God and the devil, they're aware that there is good and evil, and it surpasses mere human evil or mere human good. There is something going on behind the scenes that is, I suppose you could call supernatural. And I think if you really scratched, most people under the surface, they would admit, yeah, okay. And most people, especially in the terms of evil, have seen things in their lives that are so horrendous, they think, okay, that can't just be down to human nature. Like there has to be something supernaturally bad. Yeah.
Right, well, I suppose let's go off piste from where we normally are on this one then, and let's just go straight in. Being a man of, obviously, God, I suppose you've got to play your hand with science carefully, I suppose. Where do you stand on the science and the spirituality thing? I mean, obviously they intermingle, but certain science proves things that potentially could be contradictory within religion. So let's talk, for instance, I don't know, let's pick up a good example here. The recent discovery by Beatrice Villarreal, who's, I don't know if you're aware, she's researched and found and produced now data that's currently under peer review, that there are hundreds of thousands of unidentified anomalous phenomena for the old school people, UFOs, that are in the atmosphere. They're flying around, they're moving here, there, and everywhere, and they've been there since before we've had anything in the sky. So she's taken telescopic analysis from before 1957, was it? Oh, when Sputnik went up, the first satellite we launched. So she's taken everything before 1957, all these telescopic images, and seen these transients that she refers to them as, or UAPs, coming in and out of shot and flying around all over the place. So this data is now under peer review, but the severity of what could be confirmed is the fact that there are things flying around up there all over the place, and there has been for years. So this is essentially disclosure on the fact that there are other things, non-human intelligence flying around, non-human intelligence, I suppose, for the average person at home, an alien, ET, whatever you want to call it. Where do you stand on that?
Right, so that's a big topic. So yes, actually that doesn't contradict the Bible. It just depends what conclusions they will draw from that. So I've just described the spiritual battle between angels and demons, which has been happening since Satan fell from heaven before the creation of human beings. It's something covered in the book of Revelation called the war in heaven, and 1/3 of angels fell. Satan is described by many names in the Bible, one of which is the power of the principality of the air. So people often think, the devil and his demons, they're down in hell. That's where they're trapped. They live there. No, they don't. St. Peter says that the devil, beware, be sober, be vigilant, because your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking souls to devour. So the devil is moving about in the earth. He's moving about in the skies. We have an unknown number of demons. We don't know how many angels or demons were created, but we know Jesus said he could summon up a legion of angels at will if he so desired during his earthly life. So he could have summoned 10,000 angels in an instant. So there must be huge numbers of angels and demons. And if you consider 1/3 of the angels fell, deceived by Satan and his pridefulness to want to take God's place, then that's a heck of a lot of UAPs, of unidentified phenomena. Now, the Bible tells us angels and demons can take different forms, and also tells us that Satan can even appear as an angel of light. He's described in multiple ways in the Bible as a dragon. He's described as a serpent. So he can effectively shapeshift. So when people see these UAP phenomenon, and when people encounter, the old school term, the UFOs, what I think a lot of Christians do is they panic. They don't know how to deal with that. So they think, okay, wait a minute. My pastor never preached on this. And a lot of clergymen wouldn't have a clue how to deal with this because they haven't thought through the implications of it. So from a Christian worldview, a Christian cosmology, they can't be extraterrestrials. They can't be visitors from another planet, alien life, whatever, ET, on account of the Lord describes only creating humans and angels and the animals on the earth. And almost all science confirms to us that everything we've seen by looking out into the universe actually confirms that it is effectively a dead universe. We've found no evidence of any life anywhere else. And Earth is like the Goldilocks planet. There's a great theory called the perfection theory. So if you were to change just a tiny degree of the requirements for life by 1 or 2% on Earth, or even in our solar system, there would be no life. Add a bit more oxygen, we die. Move us a bit closer to the sun, we die. So many Christians take that as evidence of the Creator making this planet exactly in the right place with the conditions for life to flourish and flourish abundantly. So now then some Christians will say, well, it's all just a hoax, or it's all just, mythology. It's all just wistful thinking. The UFOs are just, made up, or it's just stories or whatever. I think that's a fairly foolhardy position to take, because actually there's ample evidence to prove that they exist. I mean, I've personally cast 2 UFOs out of the sky in the name of Jesus Christ and seen them disappear from the sky. So I know they're real. In the same way I cast demons out of people's houses when they have an infestation, or in the same way that I was present in an exorcism and I saw a demon leave a man. So my conclusion is that the deceptions of Satan, and his intention is to deceive and to trick, is that this is one of his big tricks, that the UFOs are some sort of apparition of the unseen realm, the demonic, and that these ETs are actually, in fact, demons. Now, that's congruent with what a lot of UAP researchers, particularly people who get into abduction phenomenon, conclude. So a lot of folks have said, okay, I don't think they're from another planet. I think these are, say, interdimensional beings, which, again, would not be contradictory to the Bible. Because, I mean, if you were to use that language, that is probably what an angel or a demon is. A being from another realm, a spiritual being.
Well, I think, again, that goes hand in hand with the science and the religious thing. I think now they've actually proven that we know that there's other dimensions. I don't think that's up for debate anymore. I think they've actually proven that. And there's also, again, when we look around us, we think we can see everything, but what we know of as humans is like 40% of everything we know. The other 60% is mystery, what the other stuff is made of around us. But like I said, the interdimensional thing, yeah, you're right. There are a lot of people that seem to think that some of these beings, at least, are interdimensional. And there's other people that think that some of them aren't, that some of them could be perhaps extraterrestrial. Some people have seen and come into contact with them. And again, we'll get into this a little bit, but, I'll get into a lot, I suppose. But when it's coming back to, obviously, the biblical side of things, I'm going to throw the word is it Nephilim in?
Nephilim, yes.
Nephilim, yeah. So if we could just touch on that for a moment. I mean, we spoke again about the Bible. If you could just explain to the audience where this term comes from, what it is, and where the link is, and let's go with that. Let's explore that for a while.
Okay, so in the book of Genesis, in chapter 6, there's a story which is very, very short, actually. For all the ink spilled on discussing the Nephilim, very short. But it's a story where some fallen angels, some demons, do something that is considered abominable to God because they cross a barrier of, morality and natural law that is not meant to be crossed. And it's described in the Bible as they take wives. They see that the human women are very beautiful and they take wives. So what that basically means is they have intercourse with, in some way that, again, how does a spiritual being do that with a physical being? We don't know. But that's the other thing I would say to folks. A lot of Christians are uncomfortable with admitting there are mysteries in the faith. There are very many mysteries of which God has not revealed to us in the Bible what we don't know. And you have to sit with that uncomfortable mystery. And, maybe there's a great deal of hubris in thinking we could or should know everything. Maybe there are things which God doesn't tell us because it would be worse for us to know. So these angels effectively rebel against God. They, in some way, impregnate these women. And there are other views suggested where there's a more metaphorical explanation for this. But I think if you take a plain reading of the Bible, and the Hebrew is fairly straightforward, that actually they did have some sort of sexual relations with these women, then what is produced is a Nephilim. And, that's described as a son of the gods. And a Nephilim are described in the Bible as giants. Now, if you go right down the rabbit hole with giants, I think there is ample scientific evidence of giants. And I think that there's been his conspiracy hat bred on significant cover-up of the existence of giants, actually, throughout the ages. And you have to look at all the megalithic structures around churches.
Yeah. I mean, we got Guy Anderson. He's a host on Across the Pond. He covered the giants in a recent episode. I don't know if you've seen it. So you're right. Yeah,
I did.
Completely on
They're
board
legit.
with that, yeah.
They were legit giants. 100%.
Well, the science is there, like you said. The evidence is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
No. And again, that's another satanic deception to attempt to cover up the truth of what's going on in the world. Because the greatest trick that Satan ever pulled on the world was to convince people that he didn't exist. So if he convinces people that the Nephilim were just mythology, then there's a great deal of evil that can be sort of manipulated through that belief. So, yeah, these they become what's called the men of renown in the Bible. So they become great heroes. So I have a theory, which a lot of other Christians who are like-minded into the paranormal tend to think, that the legendary stories you read from other pagan religions in the ancient world, a lot of these people who are maybe demigods, they weren't real gods. Pagan gods in a Christian cosmology are all just demons or idols. They're either just fake statues or they're demons masquerading to get worshipped because they love to be worshipped. But you look at the stories of, say, Hercules and Zeus siring Hercules. You look at the Babylonian Gilgamesh story, and you see actually, these guys were potentially Nephilim, half men, half angels. And this is considered very dangerous by God. Many Christians will argue that one of the reasons for Noah's flood, the first global apocalypse, was to wipe out this basically genetic aberration because it had infested the human race. And so God had to do a reset on the world, had to wipe the slate clean and wipe them out. The interesting thing is there's some more of them after the flood, which is really odd. That a lot of Christians struggle to explain because they're described in numbers. So when the Israelites go to conquer Canaan on God's command, they send scouts in, and the scouts come back terrified, except for a couple of them, Joshua and Caleb, because they say, whoa, there's giants there. We're not going to go in and fight. What do you mean we're going to go and fight and take over Canaan? I'm not going to do that. The Canaanites have giants on their side. But they're sort of shrinking over time as well. So it's like they're, to maybe, it's probably a bit anachronistic, but to put a modern geneticist's glasses on, they're, obviously if they're half angel, half human, and then they're breeding out throughout the generations, God puts a stop to it, well, that genetic line is going to wither over time. So the time you reach King David, arguably the greatest king of Israel, as a shepherd boy, he fights a giant. Well, is he a giant? It depends how you measure Hebrew cubits, because he was either 9 or 12 feet tall. Well, that's pretty darn big. But that's pretty big. But it's not as big as some of the giants described earlier on. Og, king of Bashan, this says he has an iron bed. And the darn thing's like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but let's just say it's 20 foot tall. So you're talking gigantic, supernaturally powered angel-human hybrids, which were evil because their angelic patronage, their angelic, it was a demon. So you've got, and they do end up, there's no stories of good Nephilim, put it that way. They all end up, they do sort of heroic exploits, but they're also evil. And they demand, in some cases, they demand to be worshipped, which is what we find, it's anecdotal now, it's hidden, but you find evidence of giants, and they'll often have sort of offerings put before the skeletons of these giants. Well, if you're a really big, strong, super powered, evil individual, it's pretty easy to bully people into treating you like a god, which is probably what happened. That was nuts.
If we could just connect one of the dots there, again, we always come back to the connecting of the dots. But if you mentioned the flood and the giants, the Nephilim, the sons of God that rebelled and mated with the women of humanity. And then you look at things like, Göbekli Tepe, and there's been various other places that have been essentially buried under silt and what would, or evidence that looks to be a flood. So there's these, and this, 12,000 years ago, I think it was? I think it's between 12 and 12,500
Depends on how you
years
age the world.
Yeah, well, the carbon dating, exactly, that's right. But the carbon dating on some of the stuff that they found at Göbekli Tepe goes back 12,500 years, which obviously predates the pyramids of Giza and
all civilizations,
everything else, essentially. Yeah, and they're also finding things that are even older now. Yep. But it suggests that there was a flood, that there was something there, or the sea levels raised, or whatever it was. Something cataclysmic happened that wiped out essentially everything on Earth, or a lot of stuff on Earth at least. Perhaps maybe because civilizations were smaller, that it felt like everything was on Earth. Maybe might have just been a flood in the region. Who knows? But you look at the curious things around the world. The people that would never come into contact with one another, tribes and civilizations that just wouldn't have known of each other. Isn't it interesting that a lot of their things seem to tie in to one another? You mentioned fallen gods and things like that. And now I'm going to get it again. This word might get me in trouble with some people, but I'll say it anyway. Anunnaki. There are people that make links between these so-called gods of various places. Yes, all coming from the same people, i.e. the Anunnaki. But these fallen sons of God, they've essentially started their own religions in various parts of the world. And this is where we see the pyramids and the sky people and all of the rest of it, the hieroglyphs. And everything seems to be incredibly close to one another's stories or account of things that have happened. And considering those civilizations would never have come in contact together, how do you explain those incredible phenomena of what would seem to be ridiculous coincidences?
Well, the Bible has a good answer for that. So if you take the Bible as being 100% true, which I do, so that means, for instance, you talked about science before. Science can confirm the Bible, but when it contradicts the Bible, the Christian has to accept that human beings are fallible and we could be wrong. And the history of scientific discovery is simply discovering one chain of different innovations over time that reveal that what we previously thought we knew, we didn't know. So if we take the Bible as literal, then there was a time after the flood when human beings were one monoculture. It's the Tower of Babel story. So God saw this as very dangerous because they built up a tower effectively to try and reach God or to be like God. It was that the human race had one united, because we're fallen and sinful, and we do evil, we had one united language and culture, and the potential for the harm we could do to ourselves and to the world was massive. So God scatters us all over the world. So you have a shared and diversifies our language. So that's where, so from a Christian perspective, for instance, you can't be racist. That doesn't mean you can support things like mass migration. You don't have to. That's not necessarily biblical. But you can't hate people on the basis of race, because God made one race, the human race, and there's different ethnicities and cultures within it. That also doesn't mean that all cultures are equal, because some cultures are sinful and more than others and practice evil things. So he scattered the human race across the world. Well, if we were all united from one central point and then we were scattered, it would stand to reason we have a shared cultural memory. But a bit like Chinese whispers, and I would again argue back to the demons, under the influence of demons shaping people's worldview in an effort to keep them from worshipping the one true God and to worship false gods, demons masquerading as gods, then those stories would, like Chinese whispers, alter over time. But you've hit the nail on the head there. There are shared fundamental core memories that are transnational. They go around the whole world. So cultures that couldn't ever have interacted with each other, Hopi Indians, the ancient Chinese, the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Celts, these people are almost all have a flood narrative of some kind, with one man or one family surviving, usually in a boat. So if you believe the Bible's literally true, and that's Noah, and they've got a cultural memory.
I've actually got some stats for you on that one.
Yeah.
Interesting enough. I've got biblical versus Anunnaki narrative themes, okay? So we've got the creation from clay, both of which are present on that one. A man coming from clay. Again, it says in the Anunnaki narrative, coming from clay. Sumerian text, these are Anunnaki theme, not myth. Global flood appear in both Sumerian text and the Bible. The Genesis. Divine beings interacting, again, both appear in both Sumerian text and the Bible. And then you've got heroic survivor, both of which appear in both, and then divine counsel, both of which again appear in both. So the stats for both, again, it's a bit vague to be honest with those stats, but it highlights the presence of both within both. You know what I mean?
It's a shared cultural
similar
memory.
themes, like you said. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's wider than the Anunnaki. I think a corrupted or a twisted pagan recollection of the Nephilim. I think that's what they are. And that, if you read the Book of Enoch, which for Christian viewers, that is not the Bible, it is extra biblical, but it is contemporaneous to parts of the Bible. I think probably later. I think that first Enoch's probably the most reliable. These watchers, these angels, and these Nephilim, their offspring, they taught human beings vast amounts of knowledge. How to make fire, metallurgy, things like that. And that's present in the Anunnaki story. That's also present in other pagan religions around the world. That the gods or the demigods would come and teach human beings certain things in exchange for worship, in exchange for being worshipped. And the other interesting theme I did a deep dive in a while ago is the presence of serpent gods in almost all worldwide pagan religions. And the serpent gods, reptilians and are what we would call a modern interpretation of that. It's very interesting that Satan is in the Garden of Eden, presents himself as a serpent, and the Book of Revelation, one of his titles is that old serpent, the old snake. So it's intriguing, isn't it, that most pagan religions around the world would have, if Satan were real, and he did want people to worship him instead of God, he would convince them that the serpent was a good thing, and then he would also demand worship. And huge amounts of, they have a pantheon of polytheistic gods, but huge amounts of pagan religions have a serpent god. And very often, particularly in Mesoamerican culture, these serpent gods demand sacrifice. And they're very dark, actually quite malevolent beings.
And a lot of that ties into the satanic rituals that you hear about within these celebrity realms and the high elite clubs and secret societies that people don't believe in. But, you hear a lot of this stuff. So it does tie in. But again, it's about connecting those dots, right, with the reptilians. Again, David Icke, a name that you're familiar with?
Yeah. No, David.
This is a guy who's essentially lost everything in the early 90s. He was a very well-known household name essentially on TV, and then he came out with all these crazy conspiracy theories, or everybody thought at the time, and then one after another, and then he went on the Terry Wogan show, and he destroyed him. He destroyed David Icke. He tried to make a fool of him, and then I think it was after 15 years of ridicule, he went back on for Terry Wogan's final show, like a testimonial. One more show, we'll get on the most memorable guests we've had over the years on. Well, they got David Icke on. And David Icke referred him back to his early 90s show and said, do you remember all of those things I stated would happen? Well, they've happened. And a lot of them had come true. And further to more, and then obviously ones further down the line post-2006 that have happened between then and now, more still has come true. And a lot of the stuff, he got ridiculed massively for it. But now more people are sort of listening to sort of things he's got to say. Do you know what I mean? Take him a little bit more seriously. And one of the things, obviously, that he got ridiculed for was the reptilian side of things, the overall elite class, these reptilians that were pulling the strings and organising all this satanic stuff and things like that. And there are quite a lot of people out there in the world that believe in this thing. And you're saying there's a place for that, and that this could be a spiritual thing and very much a real thing that could be going on.
Yeah. I mean, for total transparency, I think David Icke's mad as a box of frogs. But actually, he does.
I was just bringing up what he said. I'm not saying I agree with him, by the way.
He does actually touch on elements of truth, because he's observed, like we were talking about earlier on, he's observed trends that are happening in culture, in society, And I think when he talks about the reptilians, I think at one point people were saying, oh, the Queen was a shape-shifting reptilian. No, I don't think necessarily Her Late Majesty was a lizard woman. The lizard people. But I do think that actually it's intriguing, isn't it, that David would come up with that theory and Satan is presented as a serpent being. Now, what's interesting, if you really want to blow your mind, there's a rank of angels mentioned in the Bible called the seraphim, which depends how you translate the Hebrew. And we do have a wonderful Hebrew professor at our congregations. He's very helpful to have. He's helpful in many ways because he's super based. But it could be translated, this type of angel, seraphim, could be translated as flaming serpent. So it's that, and people have to remember, angels are not like cute little cherubs from the Cushell toilet paper package. They're not up there strumming little harps. Angels are terrifying beings. Yeah, they're not there. If you go to the toilet, wipe your backside, and you look at the Cushell packet, oh, God sent his little angels to look after me. Be careful what you wish for, because, if people take the time to Google biblically accurate angels, they make horror movies look mild, man. We're talking like beings that are like wheels inside wheels covered in eyes. We're talking about creatures with animal heads and human bodies. We're talking about crazy things, 6 wings, multiple eyes, flaming swords. So the name seraphim means potentially flaming serpent. So if Satan were one of these seraphim when he was an angel who worshipped God and he fell, then perhaps numerous of these demons which fell, maybe not all of them, there are probably lots of different kinds of angels that fell in the rebellion, they could well be their natural form, although twisted through being cast out of heaven, some sort of reptile serpentine form. So maybe that's what David Icke's getting at, although he's missing the mark a bit because he needs Jesus. He sounds like an American. Y'all need Jesus. But he may be getting it. There is, and like we've talked about, shadowy cabal of powerful people who actually aren't just stabbing in the dark. They actually work for somebody. They're manipulated by somebody. They sell their soul to somebody. Like we see this in the music industry a lot. They actually people
actually talk about it as well, literally selling the soul.
Yeah.
That's another thing I really want to enforce that on the potential audience here. This isn't just a fabrication of those, talking religious back and forth. This is true. There is actual satanic cults in Hollywood and in the world of celebrity that do this.
They drink blood, for heaven's sake.
They drink blood. They do this. Just look at Megan Fox and what's his name? Machine Gun Kelly, drinking each other's blood at the wedding. It's supposed to be a religious ceremony, but it's been promoted as this wonderful grand occasion sponsored by the devil, essentially. But this is real, so I just wanted to make that and hammer home that point just before you continue. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's a good point. And like I said earlier, even if you don't believe in God and the devil, then you should, at least in the very, very minimal aspect, accept that the Christian worldview, good. People who worship the bad guy, that's not a good thing. Their motives aren't good. They're anti-life. They're anti-human. They're totalitarian. They have a superiority sense that they can just tell you what to do. You are nothing but a cog in the machine to them. And if people get in their way, they are there to be cancelled, crushed, destroyed, eliminated, because they want to further their dark satanic agendas. Ike says it's the lizard people. I would say it's Satan and his demons who are pulling the strings behind the scenes. But you're totally right. If people want to look it up, I can't even remember what celebrity it was. Someone really famous, can't remember. But, he did an interview and he was saying, oh, yeah, my boss, I sold my soul to him. He tells me what to do. That's just blatant. It's totally blatant. They're like, yeah, well, I wanted money, sex, and power. And the devil said, hey, how would you like to serve me? I'll give you money, sex, and power. Like, yeah, okay.
Well, if you look at the Republican Party and the Democrats during their last election, look at all of the pop stars and celebrities that were forced, and some of them actually came out and blew the whistle on it. They were forced to back Kamala Harris, essentially be told in no uncertain terms that come out and publicly, go on stage with her at a rally or whatever, or mention on your post, or you were going to remove your contract. You're done. You're done in this field. Yep. So when you say they're selling the soul, this is legit. When people sign those record contracts, they are not them anymore. They are tools to be utilized and wielded by these companies owned by billionaire moguls who, again, who the hell are they connected? Sorry for the blaspheming. I wanted to disclaim that at the start, by the way. If there's any loose blaspheming, please forgive me. I'll do my best. I think I've done all right.
You've done very well. You've done very well.
But yeah, so it's a very real thing, the satanic thing. So we'll hammer that point home. And somebody's pulling the strings, like you said, behind the curtain, whoever Oz is, the devil, however he's doing it and manipulating it. Again, this is open to interpretation.
That's the other thing.
Real quick. And again, this is all coincidental, right? Yep. You know, there's just more dots to connect.
I mean,
it's incredible. Our left-wing story stays in the media for so long.
Oh yeah.
Anything doesn't even get mentioned from the alternative perception. It doesn't even make the media.
No.
You know, it's obvious. It's so clear and obvious.
No, I'm old enough to remember the satanic ritual abuse stuff. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that was a huge story in Britain. I mean, I was in Australia at the time, and it broke in Australia. And
about the young kids, right?
Yep.
The 2 kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a whole network of Satanists sexually abusing and sacrificing children to the devil. And, you know, the cops would try and make arrests, and they'd find blood and knives and goodness knows what else in these dens of iniquity. And they never caught the culprits, and it was mental. And then all of a sudden, that's gone. Where's the follow-up to that story? Do you think these people just stopped doing it?
Exactly right. And this was what I came aware of that story. And again, I don't know if you're the audience and you've heard of this. It was about 3 years ago I heard of that. The missus went down a rabbit hole and she dragged me into it, and she showed me, and I couldn't believe. I watched the whole interview. Was it an hour and 20 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's a police interview, and it's legitimate, by the way. It's a police recording of an interview. And you can see in the questioning room, can't you? I think, is it done in the
it'll give you chills.
I can't remember.
It'll give you
but they went into full detail with these kids. And these kids, by the way, are what, 7, 8?
Yep.
If that.
Yep.
They're so young. They couldn't have made this stuff up in their head. But basically, they're saying how the mummy, or the daddy, sorry, when he goes with daddy, they go to the church and they go into secret rooms and there's blood and there's fire and and then we eat the babies and all sorts of stuff. It's horrific.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely horrific. And if you've watched it, you will lose sleep.
Yep.
But this disappeared overnight, didn't it? There was a big uproar. Like a small contingent of people got hold of it and were like, this is crazy. And then it vanished.
And there's even an effort to paint it as a conspiracy or say it was fake. But it was in the news media. It was, and like you said, there's video evidence out there of it. And if folks think that these people just sort of stopped doing these evil things, well, you know, you only have to look at Epstein Island and the abuse that was going on there. These elites, they are capable of covering their tracks. They're capable. And if you think it's just about sexual pleasure and you know, deviancy or degeneracy, you'd be a fool. You'd be a fool because the evidence is there. And if these cabals of people are willing to do that, I mean, if you really want to go down a crackers rabbit hole, you sounds like you got a wife like mine. She went down the rabbit hole of where do all the missing kids go? If you look up how many children go missing in America and Australia and the UK, Western countries, that's just a document. Imagine what happens in the third world where they have, you know, limited government and corruption and stuff. Where the heck do the children go? And they're never found.
And what about all these underground tunnels that have now been confirmed, you know, in the US and underground bases? And they have also been confirmed by whistleblowers that have come forward that have worked on these bases.
Yep.
There's underground facilities with housing and, you know, everything basically to survive underground for an extended period of time. Perfect if you wanted to imprison somebody or keep cattle.
Make them disappear.
Exactly. But that's another thing, and a whole new topic in itself. I mean, God, you know, again, with the loose blaspheming, we could literally come on and do podcast after podcast, episode after episode, and we'll start sort of tying a bow on this. But I wanted to mention a name, and again, I don't think I'd be forgiven if I didn't mention it whilst I got you on. Chris Bledsoe. We've talked about the Anunnaki and their link in Sumerian texts and biblical, writings. But a lot of people are saying the Anunnaki are on the way back, or whoever they are, or Jesus' second coming. Chris Bledsoe, one of the people, and again, for people who don't know who Chris Bledsoe is, it was just a random guy who just so happened to be going through some major grief, and he had an experience, he had a series of experiences, and it just so happened that a lot of the intelligence agencies of the world and people very high up took an interest in what he had to say and didn't sort of view him as a kook, people from NASA, the senior intelligence agencies of the world's governments, not just the US, but Australian and the UK and various other governments as well, and even the Pope to add another person who was very interested in some of the things that he had to say. So much so, a picture of Chris Bledsoe is now in the Vatican archives. Why would the Pope think to put a picture of a random man from America in the Vatican archives who says that he's had an experience with the lady? I don't suppose you're familiar with Chris Bledsoe here.
I am a little bit, yes. I am a little bit, yes.
And what do you know and what do you think of everything I've just said there?
I think Chris is another similar figure to like David Icke. So he's touched on elements of truth. So I think, a lot of pastors wouldn't go near him with a 10-foot barge pole because they'd be too scared to tackle it. He's touched on elements of truth. But it's kind of, I say the Bible is like an anchor that holds us solid amongst the storms of life. So it's easy to get caught on headwinds that lead you to, well, in fact, the devil can use these to lead you away from God. So if you have the Bible as your anchor holding you fast, some of what Chris has said, I think, is actually revealing truth. And very much like David Icke. And other parts of what he's said, I think, depart too much from what I consider to be true. So it's a tricky one. Why are they so interested in him? Why would they want to cover him up? Why would they want to silence him, etc., etc.? Why all the high-level governments intrigue globally? Well, they must have touched a nerve, mustn't he? They must have actually hit on some truth because they're not happy about it. So, if you tick off the globe,
think about the experience. Yeah, so let's talk about the experience and let's talk about who's interested in it. So the governments of the world and the intelligence agencies and the Pope specifically got interested after he had an experience with what he calls or refers to as the lady. So he'd had a couple of experiences initially with orbs and various other things that had happened. And then on one evening when he was tending to his dogs in the dog kennel, what he describes was a huge gust of wind from nowhere that was, it wasn't there. It shouldn't have been there weather-wise. Blew him on his backside. There was a massive shine of light, and then suddenly there was a lady-like entity that came down from the light and whispered to him, basically gave him a gift of whatever it was. I can't remember. He described it as something furry, but he had this thing as a gift. He put it in the kennels, and this lady said to him in March 26th or whatever, March 2026, that humankind would be, a new knowledge would be bestowed upon humankind when the star of Regulus aligns with the Sphinx, and and it's red. And there's, they looked it up and they checked it out on the astronomical charts, and that is actually going to happen at the end of March in 2006. The star will line up with the Sphinx, and it will be red. And he says that that's when there will be a new knowledge. He mentions the second coming of Christ. And then there's other people out there talking about Anunnaki and they're returning. And then you get things like Three Eye Atlas turning up, and Harvey Loeb, a Harvard professor, saying there's a very real, we've got to look at this as potentially an NHI entity or threat or whatever it could be. We're not saying it is a threat, but there's something on its way here, and come at the end of the year, it's pretty much going to be in the vicinity of Earth. So all of these things marrying up, and again with the Pope getting interested and all these other people getting interested in what Chris Bledsoe has to say, and then you look at the world now and you think, well, it's either the media is just getting very good at its job, or there seems to be a lot more earthquakes, tsunamis, natural disasters, shifting weather patterns, hate, division, death, everywhere. I mean, it looks like the world's falling to bits, and everybody's saying that this date or in the next couple of years, something big's coming. What do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? A lot to unpack there, I appreciate.
That's quite a lot to unpack. Let me see how the old grey matter keeps up. Yeah, so I think there's every potential that, look, let's play devil's advocate. Bledsoe might have seen an angel, but he might also have seen a demon, because the Bible says that demons can masquerade as angels of light. And so if they say anything that's contrary to the word of God, to the Bible, then it's a surefire sign that they're a demon. So the Bible tells us, so for anyone watching this, if you ever have an apparition, a vision, if you ever feel like you're being visited by a spiritual being, an entity, the Bible gives us clear instructions to figure out whether they're good or bad. You have to ask them you have to discern the spirit. So you ask them if they come in the name of Jesus Christ. And I tell you, I have had spiritual experiences where these things bolt and leave at the name of Jesus Christ because they fear him. And so it's a surefire sign they're a demon. So I would love to have, been there with Bledsoe and said, listen, mate, just ask this Sheila, to be an Aussie, this glowing Sheila, is she from Jesus Christ? And then if the experience, the person experiencing these things, and we don't want to denigrate these experiences that they have, because they are real experiences. I don't believe they're all, hallucinations or people are fruitcakes. If people have had these experiences, then, we have to actually process those through some means of a lens of interpreting a worldview. So he's developing a worldview about, the return of the Anunnaki, the aliens, the stars aligning. Well, we've heard people say that many, many times before, so I always take that with a pinch of salt. But I do think a lot of these predictions and a lot of these folks who are experiencing things, and there are an increased number of people who are experiencing these sorts of things, these sort of semi-spiritual experiences, and I fear, and just people observing the world, like we've talked about, who are seeing that things are very, very bad. All of this is predicted in the Bible. So ahead of the return of Jesus, Jesus himself tells us there will be wars and rumors of wars. There'll be earthquakes in diverse places. So you'll have natural disasters all over the place. There will be a lawlessness that comes on the world. So, you just have to look at, and that lawlessness, I think, biblically interpreting that doesn't mean a lot. People say, oh, that means, a lot of immorality. No, the Bible warns us there'll be immorality. There'll be loads of, have to look at the LGBTQ thing. There's a lot of degeneracy and debauchery in the world right now going wild, absolutely wild. When I was a kid, you had, the gay couple up the street who minded their own business. They didn't march down the street buck naked and shake their backsides in front of little children. So you are getting debauchery en masse, but this lawlessness is actually just a sense of people just doing what they want to do and not caring about others. So you only have to look at here's a little tiny example, the phones theft epidemic in most major cities. The cops don't even investigate if your phone gets stolen now. They actually don't investigate if your car gets stolen. And if you steal something from a shop less than £200 worth, they won't even chase you. So that's lawlessness. That's the dissolution of a culture. That's a society falling apart. But then you have the Bible says, the love of many will grow cold. And this is what we're talking about. Just make your world a little bit better. So many people are completely self-centered, selfish, and self-aggrandizing now that they don't care whether their neighbor lives or dies. They really don't care. They get to this point where it becomes dog eat dog. It's all about me, survival of the fittest. And those are the sort of signs. To a degree, human beings have always been this way because we're broken and sinful, says the Bible, and we all need Jesus to fix us. It's going to ramp up. Now, we talked about the flood of Noah and the crazy stuff that happened then. The Bible says, Jesus says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be before his return. So I think actually the world will go to hell in a handbasket before Jesus returns. And I reckon that's what a lot of these folks are experiencing. They might not have a worldview to process it through, which is why I try and be so public and bringing the Bible into the public sphere, because it gives us a worldview of truth, objective standards of truth through which to process this. And that's where you end up with lots of different theories. So I think, if you look at the book of Revelation, there is going to be a massive battle at the end time between angels and demons and the armies of the world. And, people might believe that that's the Anunnaki returning. So it will be, in the lead up to the second coming of Jesus, like the most chaotic, terrifying, horrific time in human history. And it's all predicated by an increase in evil, the earth itself, reacting to this emergence, which is what we're seeing.
It feels like we're there now, really, doesn't it? When you think about Mother Earth itself, forget about the people and the idiot humans that are on this planet making things worse. But look at the planet itself, the way it's reacting. We're seeing shifts now. We're seeing the pole shift. We're seeing this crazy.
It's interesting you call the Earth Mother Earth, because the Bible says that it's like the birth pangs. So it's like the contractions of a woman going into labor.
Oh, it feels like that in a minute, doesn't it?
And contractions, whenever I preach on this, man, I tell people, hey, contractions, I've been there for 3 births. So contractions get more intense and closer together. And that's what we're seeing. The intensity, but the intensification of of the various things happening on the earth. I mean, probably a whole kettle of fish, but you only have to look at the crazy COVID malarkey to see how totalitarian things can get very in short order. But also the natural events happening, they get closer and closer together, but they get worse and worse. That's the thing. But part of it's God's mercy, man. Part of it's God's mercy. So God lets these things happen so that people wake up. People need to be, a slap in the face to snap out of things sometimes. There's a lot of complacency, a lot of apathy. And like we've been saying, people are waking up. There is a mass revival happening of biblical churches. I mean, my little church I started it with 2 people 2 years ago, and we're pushing 50 people now. So God is doing something. People are saying, all right, okay, I need to get somewhere. I need to make sense of what the hell's happening here. And that can sometimes only happen when, the proverbial hits the fan.
And when you look at the world and the way that it's going now, there is a wake up going on. There is. And it seems that by the skin of our teeth, we're dodging serious cataclysmic threats daily.
Mm-hmm.
With a month ago, there was Iran and America and all of that. And you think we're seconds away from it. And then a week later, you think, it's calmed down. And then Thailand decided to attack bloody Mongolia, and you think, oh my God, that could trigger China taking Taiwan. And when you look at the geopolitical state, we're on a knife edge. Mm-hmm. And it seems that there's a lot of nuclear weapons around. But again, we refer back to a lot of, from whatever they are above. Again, you see a lot of these are playing with the nuclear weapon bases, from what reports are saying. They're very interested in the nuclear weapons that humans have got. It's like idiots, like babies with matches, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's what we are. And they're playing a lot with these nuclear weapons. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. But what you're saying with the end days, things are going to get way worse before the coming of Christ, and things could potentially get better. Hopefully we don't see a nuclear war. I hope to God that it isn't that. Yeah. That's not the trigger for this whole. And what we're seeing now is, I want to say optimistically, as bad as it gets. I don't think it's going to get that way. But, I think there's probably a good a place to finish as any there, really, for now, at
Nuclear
least.
Annihilation.
Nuclear annihilation. Yeah, well, we'll finish positively, but what I say, we'll tie a bow on it for now. What I want to do is get you on again, absolutely. I've really enjoyed this chat. It's been brilliant, incredibly insightful. We've scratched the surface, I think, of some of the things that we could talk about for hours. So I definitely would like to get you back on again at some point in the future, for sure.
That would be a privilege.
What I would like you to do, if you will, for me, is leave the people with a message. If you're a casual UK resident or world resident, like I am, you're not overly religious, you can just tell the difference between what's good and what's bad. Have you got a message for us all out there now? Because it's a bleak place, like we've said already a number of times on this podcast. It's a bleak world we live in. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Please do give us a message to go away with.
Yeah, I'll give you something better than nuclear annihilation. Yes, but look, I would say to people, it is, look, let's be realists, okay? It is a very dark time for the world, particularly in Britain. We are facing, I would say, insurmountable challenges, existential threats. I would encourage everybody, I would say, look, I have read the Bible 8 times through. I'm on my 9th read through, and I can tell you the encouragement is that actually God does love us, and he does desire to have a relationship with you through his son Jesus, and that actually in the end of everything, at the end of history, Jesus wins. And so when I wake up in the morning and I turn on the news or I check my X feed and it is trouble and strife, there's definitely a spiritual battle going on. There's definitely a war going on between good and evil, but I remember that actually ultimately Jesus wins, and I want to be on the winning side. So seriously consider the truth claims of Christianity. Seriously consider, real biblical Christianity. Don't go into a church with some blue-haired lesbian, for God's sakes. Find a Bible-believing pastor. Seriously consider these things. Read the Bible for yourself. You've got a brain. God's given you reason and will, and it's, there's a lot of misinformation put out there about the Bible, like it's difficult to read or it's so onerous. It is a book that transforms lives because it's superintended by God.
Sure, you can even get an audio version now if you're not.
You can, with David Suchet as my favorite. Very calming.
So you can even listen to the audio book now if you don't have fan of reading.
You can get an app on your phone now and just play the audio Bible and start in the Gospel of John, because I think that's the one of the most beautiful depictions of the life of Jesus. And you'll encounter this man who I believe, and Christians believe, was God in human flesh, and who loves you so much he was willing to die for you. And then, even if you, well, I think by that stage you probably would have given your life to Jesus because he's pretty compelling. But even if you haven't, go to a church of people who are, like you, who are concerned about the state of the world, who are looking for hope. And, you nailed it before, brother. Our little church runs a coffee morning every Friday, and we give out free hot food and hot drinks and cake, and just go and be amongst people and a sense of community and a sense of belonging, because it's really hard to go it alone. It's really hard to go it alone. And then I would, hope those Christians would convert you. But just be among people who are good, wholesome people, man. There's a guy who started, I'll give a shout out to my mate Rob. He'll love this. He'll be tickled pink. He's just started coming to our church maybe 2 months ago. He walked in the door. He followed me online for 2 years. He was really nervous to come to church. Not a religious person, not used to church. And look, I'll be frank. Christianity, biblical Christianity, can be really weird. You come to my church, there's candles and incense, and there's a pipe organ and weird songs you've never heard. And, the pastor's in like a dress. Why is this guy dressed up in robes? What is this? It's nothing like it in the world. It's actually meant to be that way. It's meant to be a little window to what heaven is like, and very imperfect, but it's meant to be a window of heaven, right? The liturgy reflects the divine reality that God is always worshipped by angels in heaven, and people who've gone to heaven. And, so it's a big deal if you've never been to church, but just bite the bullet, give it a go, because Rob, he's given his heart to Jesus, which is amazing. But he says, I've never felt loved by a group of people before in the way that this church family loves me. And Rob won't mind me saying this, like, he was expecting to be judged. He's covered head to toe in tattoos. He's got face tattoos. He was expecting, stick in the mud, judgmental Christians to be like, ew. But we don't care. We don't care what you look like. People have me as their pastor. I mean, it's because this ugly bastard is their pastor. So you just come to church and get to know people and find a place of belonging, because it is really bleak out there. And I mean, if I wasn't a Christian and I didn't have my church family around me, I would be devastated. I can't imagine how bleak that would be. So
I'll be honest with you, speaking from experience, I kind of feel like that. It's a dark place at the minute, the real world. And I think that's something that I've been struggling with maybe the last year and a half, 2 years ago. I just think, where's the light? Where's the hope?
Yep.
And like you've just said there, I'm not overly religious, but I feel like now is the time for people, good people, to be around other good people and to make a difference. And that message that you've just given there says all of that. Well, so even if like you're casual worshiper or a casual Christian, it doesn't matter. Just go and be around good people and make a difference in your world. Yep. And maybe we could steer the ship, steady the ship. We
might be able to turn the Titanic back. Yeah. There's one closing thought I'll give you. John 1:5, it's describing Jesus. He's one of the names for Jesus is the light of the world. So when you feel hopeless, remember this: the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. So Jesus is the light. It's easy to look into the abyss and become terrified, but actually, Jesus wins. He always wins. He always wins.
Reverend Canon Brett Murphy, thank you so much for jumping on and being our guest today. It's been incredible.
Privilege.
If people do want to follow you and do want to get involved with what you're doing personally, where do they find you? Where can people find you?
Well, if you want to follow a far-right bigot, I suppose you could. Find me on YouTube. You just search Rev Brett Murphy. Find me on Facebook. So that's been growing nicely lately. Same thing, Rev Canon Brett Murphy, and on Twitter X as well.
And we'll get your links in the description below if people do want to find you a little bit easier. Again, thank you so much for coming on and being our guest. You've been brilliant.
Having me.
And we'll definitely get you back on again in the future. Otherwise, thank you everybody for tuning in and watching. Please do like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and thanks a lot. And we'll see you again on the next episode. Take care.
Just in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page.
This is a Fox News alert. The Epstein files have been released.
Across the pond.
You're looking at now, sir. Everything that happens now is happening.
Very serious.
Now.